up behind them. She's like, you guys don't have to put on the show for me. I know the truth. So this makes Elena feel some type of way. Because I guess she was just kind of, I guess she felt like only Hudson and her knew the secret. And now for someone else to know it, it's kind of like, like, wait a minute, you know? So then Hudson's called away, and he wants Elena to come with him, but Celia's like, no, we need to get to know one another. So he reluctantly leaves her there. So Celia, of course, starts talking to Elena about Hudson's past and how he makes women fall in love with them and then he dumps them. So he has like a real game that he plays, right? So immediately Elena starts to feel sick to her stomach, and she gets up to leave, and on her way out, Hudson grabs her and she's like, get your hands off me, I quit. And he convinces her, he's like, just chill out, just meet me in the car. So she went to the car. She tried to get Jordan to drive off, but he didn't. He just went and picked up Hudson when he walked out of the building. So she tells him everything that was said by Celia, and he admits that he did do that in the past, but he doesn't do it anymore. And he's like, you know, I've gone to therapy for that and everything. And so Elena decides that the sexual portion of the relationship has got to stop because she can't handle those kind of mind games, you know. That doesn't work for her. So that's the decision. Of course, immediately when she says it, he stiffens up. So Hudson goes out of town the next day. Elena falls all the way off the wagon. I mean, poor girl. She goes for runs. That helps her clear, you know, her mind and things like that. Well, what she kept doing was the girl was running by Hudson Industries. Then she would go in, drink from the water fountain. Then she'd get in the elevator. Like every day she like took it a step further. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, this poor girl, she is losing it. And she did that shit all week. So on the last day, the elevator took her to the office. And then, you know, of course, Hudson looked kind of surprised to see her. And he's in there having a business meeting, and the guy left. And he's like, you know, what are you doing here? And she's like, well, I just want to see if you came back in the town. And he's like, you could call or text. And she's like, you don't respond to my text. And he's like, I didn't respond to one text. She's like, well, you know, basically, you can't do that. Because it doesn't take much for this girl to spiral. So he's like, okay, I'm sorry, you know, I will, you know, from now on, I will respond to you so that way, you know, I want you to, like, lose it, you know, I will do that to help him spiral. So she leaves from his office, she goes to a set of meetings, she speaks with Lauren, and tells Lauren she's done, and Lauren's like, well, let's make a list of all the things you've done, all the sets of behaviors that you didn't do, but that you were considering doing, and let's offset that with positive behaviors, like, let's, you know, find something to do. So she's going to do, like, the ADI's top 100 movies of all time. So she goes to work, and David had an attitude, and she finds out the reason he canceled their meeting the other day was because he saw in the paperwork she was a Hudson. So he's like, basically, you're this guy, I'm just a slut. And I was like, damn, you know, that was bold. So now she's pissed, and she was kind of like, wait a minute, you're going to give me the job regardless, right? Because it was based off of my hard work, correct? And he's like, well, yeah. And she's like, did Hudson tell you to give me the job? He's like, well, no. She's like, so how the hell am I doing something? How am I a slut? You know, I haven't done anything to get a promotion. So he kind of realizes what he said, and he's like, apologetic and everything. So they're kind of okay now. So then Hudson invites Elena to the opera. He's out of town again. He had to go back out of town because there's another issue going on with this company. And he's like, I'll meet you at the event. So she goes to the opera. Celia and Celia's parents are there. And so then right before the lights dim, the show's about to start. Here comes Hudson. He shows up. He holds her hand through the whole event. And then after they go to the, you know, she goes to the restroom, and she hears Celia and her mom talking about Hudson and her. And the mother's like, it won't last. No one stays with their first girlfriend. And Celia's like, he's a psycho. You know, why would I want to share jeans with that? I'm like, damn. And it's supposed to be his friend. I mean, she would know, you know. But I'm like, jeez. And the mom was just like, you know, so what? You know, all that money, like, girl, that's still a good cash. So then they go back out. Of course, you know, Elaine wants to tell him what she's heard, but Celia gets there quickly, and she kind of sees, you know, them laughing, you know, saying jokes, and she hates it. Like, it just, you know, certain things, another person may be like, oh, I see that, may bother me, but she has a whole ass obsession issue. And so everything she takes, like, I overthink things, right? But this girl does it on a whole nother level. Like, it affects her behavior, you know? like on just such a grand level. So for her to see that closeness with someone else, even though he's known this girl his whole life, but there's an intimacy that she sees, that she longs for with him, and it crushes her. It's like it's just beyond for the poor girl. I feel bad for her because I'm like, shit. It's like she has no control over, what it does to her. It's so sad. So they're getting ready to leave. She's waiting in the car because he drove. So she gets in the car and she looks back and she sees him whisper something in Celia's ear, and sees Celia laugh, and the girl just wants to cry. Like, it's just too much for her. So he gets in the car and they drive a little bit. Tension's thick. And then he's like, what's going on with you? And she was like, you rejected me. And he was like, you giving me mixed signals, And then he was like, besides, we were headed to the penthouse anyway. And she was all like, so you were going to just take me there even though I said such and such? He's like I said, you giving me mixed signals. So, yeah, we were going. So they get up to the penthouse. Of course, before they can even hit the door, they're like making out harsh. Oh my gosh, it was so hot. So this was a hot scene to read as well, I must admit. It really was. And so it started off like she was giving him a blowjob, and she was just getting so into it. Like, she was like, she wanted him to come in her mouth, and he didn't want to do that. So he like pulled back. And she was like, what's wrong? Like, what did I do? And he's like, nothing. He was like, I just want to come in that sweet cunt of yours. I'm like, shit. And so that was hot. I was like, woo. So then he did like the sexiest move where he picked her up and he like put her against the wall and fucked her hard. Oh my gosh, it was so erotic to read that. That was a good scene. And when they're done, the girl's like, I want some more. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. He's like, you don't have to be to work until 1 o'clock. We're going to get it in a couple of more times. I was like, now that's what I'm talking about. So that weekend, they go to the Hamptons. They drive up. Elena lets him know, she didn't like how last night went, because she needs to know up front what she's getting thrown into. And he's like, I mean, what could have possibly changed, if you would have known, like, the night didn't go bad. And then she's like, for me, it's because I start spiraling when I can't figure stuff out. And so then she starts a game with him where she's like, let's just kind of get to know each other. So they started asking each other questions and things like that, just trying to get familiar. And of course, at first, he doesn't really want to do it. And then her brother keeps calling her, and she's ignoring the calls. And he's like, who keeps trying to call you? And she could hear the jealousy in his voice. And she's like, oh, it's just my brother. And he was like, oh, your brother Brian? Now, she's never told him. Her brother's name is Brian. But of course he's going to know this information. The man know about your whole ass restraining order. Like, he's looked you up, So, he's been calling her, ever since that argument, and she's just like, she just don't want to talk to him. She's like, screw it. So she tells him a little bit about her background, and they just have a little back and forth conversation. So when they arrive to the house, of course it's magnificent, something like out of a movie, And Mira and her husband are there. Of course, she's happy to see her. They're so sweet. She's so sweet. And then the mother pops up. And she's not as nasty as the first time, but that's probably because she's a little tipsy. And she has a drink in her hand. And so Hudson is like, we're going to sit up in the East Wing. And the mom's like, that's far away from everybody. And he's like, well, we need our privacy. And Elena can get pretty loud. So of course his mom is like, oh my gosh, and his mother is like, he's like, Mom, it's not like we're virgins, we've both been active since we were 16, So their little game in the car actually helped, because he learned a little tidbit about her. So it worked. So then they go upstairs, and of course she asked him, are we still on the job, or is that he's like, we're done with the job. I'm just gonna have sex with you. So they have this great session. Both came so many times. It was wonderful. And so she kind of brings up the fact about him manipulating women, and how, in her brain, she's kind of wondering like, well, why won't you do that to me? And that right there for me, I was like, yeah, this is how you know she's all the way off the rockers. Because what do you mean? Why would you want him to play that game with you? Like, but for her, in her mind, it's like, I don't mean enough for you to play those games. Everything comes back to her, and on this whole other level, it's kind of crazy. So he's like, if I played those type of games with you, he said, I would destroy you. And she was like, a part of me kind of wants you to do it. And that's how you know, yeah, she a little off the rockers. So he asked her, do you know what it is that makes you like so crazy about men? Like, why do you get so obsessive? And she's like, I don't really know. She's like, I've gone to therapists. They feel like it's because of how, I lost my parents so young. And she went through like a whole destructive period where, a lot of sex, drugs, all kind of stuff. So Brian has had to deal with her with a lot of shit, So he really has. So then on top of that, this the obsessiveness that she has, and she's had it with multiple men. You know what I mean? So it's a lot, I don't know. So she's like, I don't know, but that's what they think it's coming from. And so the next morning they go down for breakfast, and they do it again, of course, before. Then they go down, and she took a little longer to get ready, so she left after him. And so she overhears Hudson and his mom Sophia in the kitchen, and Sophia was like, well, geez, I didn't invite you guys to just screw the whole weekend. And he's like, well, why did you invite us? And she's like, because I feel like she ought to know what she's getting herself into. And so while she's listening, someone taps her on the shoulder and is like, who's in there? And it's Jack, which is Hudson's dad. And so Hudson's like, you don't want to be in there. Let's go, have you taken a tour of Maple Shores? And she's like, what's Maple Shores? And that's the name of the home. So he takes her on a tour. He's flirty, but nothing crazy. And so they leave, and they go outside after they've done the whole tour of the home, and they're just kind of sitting there talking. And then Hudson comes over and he's looking like kind of like, what's going on? Like, he's possessive when it comes to, I think, probably anything, but he's possessive about his Elena. And so he puts his hand on her knee in like a very possessive way. And before Hudson had walked over, Jack was kind of telling her, because she was saying how, they were trying to, pretty much get some brownie points with Sophia. And Jack's kind of like, I don't know why he's still like that. Like, I thought he had gotten over that, but he's still trying to please his mom. So we're starting to like see some layers, like, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. So then Hudson comes over and does the whole possessive on the knee thing. So then later on, she finds out Mira had gone shopping with Sophia, but she was talking with Jack, and that's why she missed going with her. And she was kind of mad because she really likes Mira. But then she was like, it's okay, because her and Sophia, they're not the best. She's like, it's okay. So then Hudson goes to working on the proposal. She